All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back again as promised. We got Micah Singleton here again tonight with us. This will be the third and third and final episode, and we're interested in see how this entire story unfolds, and we can't really wait to hear what's going to happen. Once again, if you notice the title, I called Micah the man between worlds, and that kind of seems to be a good summarization of what he's been going through. We ended episode 2 with Micah kind of explaining his timeline of events. And so if you haven't heard that, go back, take a listen to it, kind of absorb all that, because it's a lot to take in. And now, Micah, I'm going to turn it over to you, and in your own words, please feel free to wrap up your story, sir.
Copy that. Gentlemen, it's good to be with you again this evening. I tell you, whenever you spoke to me about it, I definitely was going to say something. I really hadn't thought of exactly those words to describe it. But when I saw the title on the video, I kind of had a chuckle and said, wow, I guess that I started thinking about it. Wow, it very much fits like a puzzle piece. And also in the category of, just to be clear, as I've said before, I spent most of my life explaining this stuff away, and I got really, really good at it. Making use of, Occam's razor reasoning, until Occam's razor was really pointing a direction I'd never fathomed was real, which is how all of this could possibly be connected. But to finish with that, I don't have too many addendums to the previous, but what we're going to do is we're going to kind of shoot ahead. The years in between, I worked service industry. I was an ocean lifeguard for 6 years along Myrtle Beach. And I was one point of interest prior to what we're getting to would be around the year 2010. And this was the final sleeping moment that was just right in my face. And it was just a situation, and it did not involve me alone. It involved me and my daughter. We had just moved back to Myrtle Beach, and I had a lot of boxes in my room. And, I think a lot of people would relate to this, that when you're in a rush to move, in some cases, you label your boxes junk drawer number 1, junk drawer number 2, and just dump it and go from memory of what you'd be looking for in that drawer. Well, I had junk drawers 1, 2, and 3 all in one huge box, probably about 1,000 different items. I was going through it, and I found a little yellow tab of lens cleaner. And I was like, I need that for, my glasses. Well, I put it back in the box, and I was going through something else in my room, and my daughter came out of the living room and came into the room. And she picked a couple of her toys out of one of her boxes. And as I was about to leave the room, I said, okay, Becca, let's go in here. And I went to go walk out the room. And just like you do an about face when you remember something, and I turned around and went, and as soon as I turned around, she was looking me directly in the eyes. And we made eye contact for not even a split second. She walked straight to that box and grabbed that little yellow tab of lens cleaner out of all the things in there, walked straight up to me, handed it to me and said, "Here, Daddy," and walked into the living room. And I'm sitting there going, what just happened?
Interesting.
And, that, now, mind you, at this time, that things like that were furthest from my mind. And I waited a little while till I finally asked her. I was like, Rebecca, when I asked her about it, she had no memory of it. She's like, I don't remember that, Daddy. But again, that was just something that connected on that. And I feel, considering everything we're about to get into, that would be a good mention. But in 2018, I moved up to Little River. At this time, myself and my children's mother were separated, and I was on my own. Well, I started a construction job and ended up working some good hours. I was making great money, had my own little studio apartment. And one night, I was walking across the street, and twice before, I had seen this help wanted sign on the ground out of the marquee for a restaurant called the Brentwood Winery and Bistro. And I had just done the nice thing and put it back up on the marquee. And I kind of looked at it this time and said, you know what? Maybe this is a sign, just kind of jokingly, because I was thinking about a part-time job. And I went in, applied for a job, got hired on the spot. And I worked there up until just after the pandemic. But as I was working there, they told me that for the employees, they had a home that they had purchased a house, pretty large house. It was 6 bedrooms, 2-story home built in the early 60s in the Little River area. And I finally spoke to one of the owners and said, I might be interested about moving in there because that would, help me out, considering, what I was paying for my studio, and they gave you a discount at the house. So I moved in there, I believe it was July of 2018. But when I went to go look at the upstairs room, I originally the landlord, the owner, she took me to look at one of the smaller rooms that was adjoining. And I saw how small it was, and she said, well, we do have this other room, but it's not been cleaned up yet. And I'm like, that's no problem, let me take a look at it. And that's when I saw that room I was in and the other room shared a little atrium in the middle with a large closet. And it had that's where the bathroom was to be shared between both rooms. As I went to go walk into what was later to be my room, as soon as I went to go put my foot over the threshold in that doorway, I looked down and saw a line of what appeared to be salt at the doorway. And of course, instantly, growing up in this area of Hoodoo or going to Buford on people, you know pretty much what someone's intent was. Someone thought that, it looked like some type of salt barrier for whatever paranormal reason someone placed it there as possibly a form of protection or to ward something off. And honestly, I laughed. What really made me stop laughing is that the closet door right beside it was open, and I looked, and I didn't touch it, but I instantly recognized there was a deck of tarot cards, a vintage deck, sitting in that closet. And I put 2 and 2 together and said, wow, well, I guess somebody believed in it. Well, I later discovered that it was not just any tarot deck. It was one that was, amongst people in that community, it's quite a coveted deck. It was a 1971 Rider-Waite reissued deck. But to get to that room, now I had sent you a diagram of basically just a few, basically the schematics of the room and a couple of points of interest of just not even a hint of what ended up occurring in there. But it was, I got settled into that place probably over the next week. And now I have several other roommates that are also co-workers. And it's quite predominant to people that they should know, if you work service industry late at night, a lot of those guys party till the wee hours in the morning. Well, there was occasionally there'd be some people over that might have a little bit too much to drink, so they can't drive, and the room next to me was just a casual crash spot, you know. So it was common for people to crash in there. Well, that's what I thought was going on. In reality, that was not the case at all. I was there for about a week. I looked over and said, wait, how'd my bathroom door get open? And I'm looking at it, but there's like I dare say, a shimmering purplish haze over the entire door. And before I could really notice that, a guy just walked right up and was looking at me from the other side, just as real as you and me. And I looked at him and, you know, not freaking out, because I figured this was probably one of my housemates' friends just using either my bathroom or, you know, crashing in the room next door. So I just said, hey, bathroom's right there. Please jiggle the handle when you're done. And they just stood there, and after a while, I glanced back up. They were gone, and my door was shut. And I thought it was kind of curious. I didn't hear him shut the door. This kept happening. And different people were coming in that doorway, and they would just stand and stare at me. Men, women, I remember them all vividly. I could probably spend hours just describing them. It was something that, at that time, I figured it was, you know, just what I originally had mentioned. It was actually somebody. Well, I finally got fed up with all of it, and I pulled an executive move. I grabbed my drill, put a bit in it, took a bunch of wood screws, and I went in that other room, and I screwed the door shut, the windows, everything. And I figured maybe they'll take the hint. This is just getting too intrusive. And plus, I was starting to think about, you know, my property and things in my room and people having access to it. And I knew the landlord wouldn't really say anything, but, you know, and I would just unscrew the door if she was going to, you know, rent the room to anybody. This is the hard part. Again, something drew me to look at that door. And I saw that same effect. It was like except this time, I saw it drop down from the top of the door, somewhere in that top section, like it was a curtain falling But, we're in a theater. When the curtain falls, the show's over. When this sheer veil, as I came to call it, when this sheer veil went over that door, the show actually began. I saw the door shift and then open from the hinge side instead of the doorknob side. And I saw a guy standing there holding the door like he was trying to pull it off and set it to the side. And I jumped up and started cursing at him, saying words I won't repeat on here. And just as, and I basically told them, to get out in not so nice a way. And I kind of charged toward the door and got about 2 feet from it, which was literally 2 feet from him. This guy, he had a slightly Latino look to him in his features. He was wearing an old style black dirty trucker's cap, kind of a gray shirt. And he tried, and it looked like he was putting my door back on the hinges. And when he went to go shut it all the way, my doorknob was broken. So it wouldn't, there was no clicking mechanism for it to go into the door jamb. And he looked at me, and as clear as you and me, he said, "Has it always been like this?" I was like, "Yeah, dude, it's all good." And in his voice, I actually felt bad for yelling and screaming at him because he didn't react to it, and I was like, man, this guy's being cool. I lost my cool. And he shut the door. Well, I'm able to see underneath the door, and the light's on, so I can see the shadow of his feet moving around, and I'm waiting to hear that other door to the room open. I never heard it. I'm like, well, I guess he's using the bathroom. And then I'm thinking, I'm getting mad because I knew somebody had to go through my room to unscrew the other door. So I waited a few minutes, and I finally went into the bathroom. No one was there. And I opened the other door to the other room, turned the light on. No one was there. I get up to the door, and it's still screwed shut. I didn't know what to think of it. At that point, me being the guy that's been great at explaining things away, of course, I had only one conclusion. This is an old house. It's got to have a secret passage somewhere. There's no other way. And that was something that I never was able to find because there was not one. That door was the passage. I came to discover later.
So, Micah, let me just stop you there for a moment. But just to kind of gather everything you've said so far in a bit of a nutshell, but you moved to Little River. You got a job at a local restaurant there, and this restaurant offered housing for some of its employees, and you decided to take them up on that offer. And when you moved in, you had your own little room and a lot of people coming and going. And although you didn't mind that so much, initially, you, like you said, you found the salt around the doorway. You then found what appeared to be a very vintage deck of tarot cards. And then the you thought what you thought were actual people coming and going out of your bathroom door happened to be something else that was passing through a doorway that
Yes.
you could not see
Now,
until
mind you, at that
you
point,
finally saw what was actually happening. Am I understanding?
I'm still trying to go with what I know, which is to explain everything logically. I was stumped. I was the last possible, anything remote possibility would have been that there was honestly that there had to be a secret passage and somebody was using it, somebody that may have lived there before. The house was very large. There was a couple of other unoccupied rooms at the time, but I was trying to, I just couldn't go that it was something paranormal at that time, because when I was face to face with that guy in the doorway, he was just as real as you and me. And to hear his voice, I can still hear it in my mind. Now, at that time, and for most every time this occurred, other than coffee, there was nothing in my system. I need to go. I probably should have clarified that in the very beginning, because it really, I started realizing something else, and this is a slight backtrack. When I had made mention that I had chronic insomnia, I had a way of dealing with it. I would just close my eyes, I would put my headphones on as a kid, and I would let the music take me away somewhere with my imagination. Well, that imagination turned into what I thought was a 4K HD reality imagination. And I was able to go anywhere, do anything. And I would stay awake all night, just literally exploring all these unique places behind my eyelids. Now, that became something I kept private to myself, because, it's my imagination, and nobody wants somebody wearing a white coat and a pocket full of happy pills knocking on your door. And I'm pretty sure that if I had told a situation like that, considering my previous experience when I was younger, that probably would have occurred. And also, another thing to state is the restaurant I worked for is one of the most haunted. It's arguably in the top 5, top 10 most haunted restaurants in the world. It's had the Discovery Channel's gone there. They've found great amounts of evidence, but I don't really want to cut too much on that just yet. But what put me in the position when I started realizing there may be something to this, wow, maybe this is something people would call paranormal, is the fact that I worked for a business and that was part of their income. They would have ghost tours and ghost dinners, and I'm sitting there going, yeah, if I go saying that, people are just going to think I'm trying to perpetuate my job. Oh yeah, you work at a haunted place, of course you have a haunted house. Well, that was the situation I was in. That's why I was very reluctant to speak to anyone about it, and I kept very much everything to myself. Well, in that room, when I would close my eyes and just do what I had done my entire life, it was stronger. It was more vivid. It was more real, noticeably from the beginning. And it got pretty deep, because that's when I realized that, there's a little more to this thing I've been doing my whole life than I really imagined. because I just noticed the difference in the room. And that's when I started taking all the stuff in, you know, the barrier of salt, the Rider-Waite tarot deck. And I had never really asked about the previous tenants. And the only thing I had heard is that they moved out suddenly and they quit their jobs at the Brentwood for whatever reason. Well, I never opened that deck. One thing I didn't want to take a chance on was, you know, that I might be touching something or dabbling with something that I obviously was confused over at that time because I didn't believe, but I knew I had to start not necessarily changing my belief, but opening myself up to some other possibilities of if I wanted answers, I wasn't going to find them the regular way because I would have found them at that time. There was no secret panel anywhere in there. There was no way for anyone to get access to where I could see someone through that doorway. So, with that being said, it was one night laying there with my eyes closed, my headphones on, listening to some music. I was transported somewhere. And I had an experience. And I instantly opened my eyes because it was just too extreme. And I'm not going to touch too much on what that experience was because it was not a nice one. It was not a happy place I went. And I don't feel comfortable ever speaking about what I saw, because it would do nothing but disturb people, and that gets me nowhere, and it does nobody any good. But I
understand.
You have to forgive me. It's just remembering everything. Thank you.
You're good. Take your time.
I'll just outright say it. There was a portal in that doorway. It wasn't charged by whoever was living there before. I believe they may have possibly found a way to activate it, perpetuate it, or do something. But it was actually opening itself for me on command.
Any thoughts or reasoning?
It didn't come quick, but what people refer to as your inner sight, or commonly known as your third eye, well, I didn't believe in any of that stuff, and it would have been easier if I did, because that's exactly what was happening. My third eye had been open for a long time, but still dumb. Because all that stuff I was seeing behind my eyelids, the places I was going, I was, by definition, astral traveling out of my body to other places. And that room had a type of energy that was just so strong and so immense that it fed into me, and the room was like a transformer, and I was just a conduit, if I'm using that terminology correctly. And whenever I would look at that door and focus, I would see that sheer purple veil slowly descend over the door. And I couldn't control what I saw next. It's not like I could just think something and then see it in the doorway. I basically had to take whatever was there. And they all came back. The guy in the trucker hat, he came right back, resituated my door, and this time there was a woman behind him. And I actually spoke to her. It wasn't like a spirit giving me a message. It was just like a woman that was looking at me, except she was just as confused as to why she was seeing me as I was of seeing her. It was almost like, I dare say, I was looking through a window to another person on the other side that was just as confused as to how this was working. I've usually never had problems discussing this. I'm not really sure why I'm just, it's strange. It's like everything's kind of euphoric in my mind right now while I'm trying to focus and say this. But to get myself back on track here, on that page that I sent you, that would be the bottom right. I think I titled it the main portal. Okay. And the regular doorway would be up at the top that came into my room.
Yes,
and that one had the same effect as well. That's why I titled it the overflow portal. Gentlemen, I guess I'd probably do better if you give me a second and you give me a good question if you have one right now.
No, you're fine. So let me ask you this. I see a note, I guess. You said you title it, it says a room of doorways I had to close. So I guess my question to you is, at any point did the spirits that you were seeing, I don't know how you would like me to phrase it, if they were spirits, if they were souls, if they were, the restless dead, whatever you would like for me to call them. I guess my question is were they ever violent? Were they ever, I guess my question is, what made you feel like you had to close those
I would
doorways?
say, and yeah, you understand I got to word this right. Slightly what I was referring to of seeing things I could never speak of, except what I'll describe is when I said it was random. I couldn't control what I saw. Sometimes they were very horrible things. And one of them was, I looked through that doorway. Now, mind you, I'm deliberately doing what everyone says not to do in a situation like this because I wanted answers. I'm experimenting with it. Now that I'm realizing I can do it, and honestly, there's part of me that's a little kid going, holy crap, this stuff's real. This is really happening. Wow. And I'm looking at it, and I saw something that could be construed as a ritual that ended up with a victim's demise. I saw it clear as day, and that's when I realized that I can't move. I got to get somebody in on this. This is just, and then I was kind of scared because I'm like, what if I'm really going crazy? And, just as hard as it is for me to describe accurately everything that occurred. I kept that in the back of my head the whole time for myself, impartially, that I could be going crazy. And that's when a situation occurred about, I want to say late September of 2019. That is when I was looking at that doorway, and I was basically at this time trying my best to think of positive things, thinking that might affect the outcome of what I saw. Now, mind you, also, all of this it should be said, all of this occurred at night, usually just before midnight and all the way till sunrise. None of this until later on in the experience occurred during the daytime. But there was a night that I was looking straight at that doorway, and I saw something coming at me, a monstrosity. It was a type of human that just should not exist. Its features were literally designed to cause fear. That's what I felt. And it started coming at me through that door. I became paralyzed, but at that moment, I felt a warmth. I felt a confidence. I felt a reassurance. And as Hollywood as this sounds, it's just easier to visualize the moment things changed in that room. And that was, most everybody's seen The Predator. The Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Well, The Predator had that really cool laser beam thing on his shoulder that just would acquisition a target and take it out. I can't help but think that, because this was not a laser beam. This was not a weapon on my shoulder, but from my upper left shoulder, an inverted sword-shaped beam of light shot from my body out of my shoulder into that monstrosity that was charging me. And it blasted it into another place that was not there. It just, I'm not getting, I try and be correct on my words. I don't know if it destroyed it. I don't know if it banished it. I don't know what it did, but I know it was no longer there, and I didn't feel threatened. And, mind you, coming to grips with everything that I had really not believed in my whole life. And, a term and a phrase I coined, by all definitions, especially with every occurrence in that room, I was living in a nuclear-powered poltergeist. That would be the best way to describe it. But with, I dare say, dimensional access through portals, or the ability for them to occur in that area.
That's interesting. One thing I'd like to point out concerning this drawing is that I noticed that you have the directions, all four directions marked on here: north, south, east, and west. And like you were describing to us, before the show, that this is, you had kind of have interconnecting lines here almost. And I guess when your dog,
you are,
your dog
yes,
at the time, Snooker. Am I saying that correctly?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Jimmy Fly.
Hey, Snooker, someone recognized
Jimmy
where your
Snooker.
name came from. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Superfly, Jimmy
Superfly. That's it.
Yeah. I don't know why I was thinking but yeah, Snooker, who is your dog, chewed holes in the walls, I'm assuming,
yes,
in all four directions.
That was something, because where I worked at, I was fortunately able to come home on my breaks because it was only a 2-minute walk. And, my boss, my employers were pretty cool about that. So I was able to take him out as he needed throughout the day. But I started noticing that on one of the walls. And I'm like, dude, you're going to get me in trouble with this. You're tearing the sheetrock up. And it was after a while that I started noticing that each, like I titled it, he was doing it in every corner of the room. And
do you think maybe I'm sure he did.
Oh,
he
yes.
Something was going on as well.
He reacted. He was my corroboration to everything. Most people say, a service dog is there for support and things like that. My dog did the ultimate service. As crazy as my story sounds, if I am crazy, I don't believe it. Because he was reacting to everything I was witnessing as well. And
well, Micah, that's not too, that's pretty common with animals. They, we know that their senses are heightened much more so than humans are. And for them to be reacting to the same stuff is, would be almost expected in a way, especially if you got, a dog that's close to you. And, obviously, Snooker is. But yes. And so, they'll even feed off of your emotions and feelings at the time as well, as much as anything. So, that's almost one of those cooperations, like you said, that, that confirms that there is something not normal, something paranormal afoot, so to speak.
Right. And one thing I lost touch on earlier when I said that I needed to bring somebody in on it, but I couldn't. I did contact a local husband and wife paranormal team that had actually investigated the Brentwood Winery and Bistro one night. They were friends of the owner. And I asked consent of the owner because I had made her aware of some of the activity in the home, but I didn't detail it. She was receptive to that because she was also interviewed for one of the Discovery Channel's My Haunting Stories, and she had several paranormal encounters in the restaurant, so she was very much a believer. But when I contacted that husband and wife team, and I gave them some of the details of at one point, at a glance, I saw some symbols on the door before it activated. And I recognized them as something I had seen before. They looked almost like, I would say, similar to, the closest thing I found similar is surprisingly, Mongolian symbols, old Mongolian symbols. That's what they appeared as, but there were some other symbols that were very similar to, at that time I started researching different occult items, and lo and behold, they matched up, and I told this paranormal team, I said, some of these symbols, I'm finding them in the Key of Solomon's Goetica. When I told them that, they said, no, we will not be coming there. You need to move. And that was the last communication I got from them.
I have never opened the book that you're referring to. I have heard about it. And yeah, that is beyond my reach. There are some certain books that, in my opinion, I personally would never open, and that would probably be one of them.
Yeah, fortunately, I didn't either. This was just doing online research through symbols. Yeah. So, but still, you know.
Yeah, that one's definitely kind of one of those off limits. There's too much to chance there. And, and obviously you were aware of that too. So, kind of going to the mirrored source.
Oh, yeah.
kind of allows that protection.
So let me ask you this. You have a drawing in the top right corner. It says key requested, and you have you see a circle, and then there's some drawings down there at the bottom, and it says the part I could see. Is that the symbolism that you're referring to?
Somewhat.
Okay.
It was very similar. Now that is what I discovered, and through some other people that I've met along the way, I felt comfortable speaking with, they've actually kind of corroborated it as well. That I did not draw it in its entirety for obvious reasons.
I got you.
I did a loose drawing because everything in my mind, that's a sigil. And it's not just any sigil. It's my personal sigil. Because through time, when I started staring at that door before the veil, I noticed something that I could barely faintly see happen. Because I'm visually documenting all these mechanics, trying to get an answer, trying to explain it logically as I can, even though I know I'm past the point of what I can discover in a dictionary. And I suddenly saw that full, very translucent sigil move around with where I looked, it would go. And it was like it was waiting to attach itself to something. And when I looked at the door and just barely thought, well, how do I attach it to the door? Or am I attaching it to the door? And all of a sudden, it pressed itself up against the door for just a second and disappeared in a not a smoky mist, but like a wisp of smoke is what it appeared like. And then the purple veil would fall and the show would begin. That was something that some other people that are in the spiritual psychic line of work, when I told them about that, they actually used whatever means they could and verified, said, oh my gosh, I have a sigil too. Do you want to see it? And that's when I gave them the warning. that may be for your eyes only. And from everything I've seen, now that I know that it's possibly very much real, you probably don't want to be dabbling with that or experimenting. Myself, different story. Something inside me told me to be comfortable with it. And it wasn't another voice somewhere. But that basically is the activator. That's the mechanics of it. If I put it, here's the part where I'm getting a little more comfortable. If I were to do that on this glass table in front of me, it would activate it, and I could see through it and somewhat control what I see, or at least place my desire to see something, and it would happen. And what that gave me is it gave me a thought back to history. And some people in the pagan community that I've spoken to just looked at me and laughed when I described that to them. They said, yeah, it's called scrying. And I'm like, wait a second. I've heard of that, but I really hadn't given that any thought. But I believe that is the mechanics in how that occurs. I believe that very possibly John Dee, historically, Nostradamus, and probably so many others had discovered something similar to that ability or a way to switch it on. And we're able to use it similar to the way I came to be able to use mine.
So let me ask you this. Is that location, that home, has that been the only place you've been able to use it, or that you've tried to use it?
No. That was the place that woke me up to it. And before I moved, I actually wondered, is it exclusive to just this area?
Right.
And no, I was in a very, I discovered staying in a very old plantation house that is part of one of my cousin's places. He inherited it. Very, very old plantation house built in the late 1800s. In that home, it worked almost a little too good. Cool story, too, by the way. I can shoot this one real quick because it's actually positive. The night I figured out by myself in that home, the home had no electricity, no one there, but I closed my eyes. And when I closed my eyes, I saw the same room I was in, and I saw probably about 9 to 10 women in old, very old yesteryear maid outfits, like servants. They were both ethnicities, white and black. And then I saw something that just stuck out. And I'm going to be clear. Sometimes you'll hear me talk like surfer dude. It'll change up because, I was born and raised on the coast of South Carolina. We had the best of all the worlds. We could be a redneck on a surfboard. It was great. So this is not uncommon for me. And the reason I say that is because I suddenly saw one person that did not fit the picture I was looking at in that home. And I just yelled out, "Holy blank, a conquistador? Dude, no way." And it was a Spaniard in old Ponce de Leon looking armor. And when I said conquistador, he looked me directly in the eyes. And I felt like I insulted him. And this all happened over a microsecond, and I'm looking, and all of a sudden, I saw something he wanted me to see. it was like I saw one of his memories. He was able to push a memory into me. And that memory was a simple one. There was a table, big wooden table. It looked like we might have been in a ship, in a captain's, in a captain's quarters. And there was a huge map on the table. And he was charting something with two other people. And then I realized and kind of rolled the dice. I was like, oh, wait a second. You're not a conquistador, you're a captain? And it was like, he just nodded his head yes. And I just started thinking, wait a second, because I'm already believing. I'm seeing a lot of evidence at that point in that home that I'm seeing people that are formerly living. And they knew I could see them. They, I dare say, were kind of scared of me. Him, however, he was confused and separated from the other ones. And I started thinking, wait a second, how could that, a Spaniard get this far? Well, that's when my knowledge of local history kicked in. De Velazquez in 1525, 1526 was pushed into Winyah Bay seeking shelter from a storm, loved the area of Georgetown, kept it charted on the map, and the following year they brought 500 settlers to Georgetown and they founded Elizabethtown, named after the Queen. It lasted for roughly a year, just less than 100 of the original 500, if the documentation is to be believed, survived. And it was just a little too harsh for them. They allegedly didn't make friends with the natives and things of that nature. But Elizabethtown is somewhere in Georgetown and archaeologically has never been located. So I got to thinking, well, if maybe this guy was part of something to do with that, because it is within an area that very well could fit that bill and criteria of the settlement location near the river. But, that's pretty much it with, that. I just thought that was a cool one to throw out there. So, yeah, it went with me, and honestly, at risk of, what another person thinks, which doesn't matter to me anymore, I can still do it now. I've had it happen inside this home. Mm-hmm. I've had it happen many other times, except I have a greater control over it now.
Right.
And I feel confident that I've purified it, meaning there's no attachment to me anymore, because that was one part that we're going to go back to right now, back at that house. I had, as we're up to the point of that with, I want to say, September roughly 2019, that's when I saw that light shoot out of my shoulder and just absolutely destroy one of the most hideous things I ever saw. If you were to describe a demon, I could describe half of what I saw and it would easily trump it. So I have to very much, just with my personal self, I have to give it credibility that it very well could have been either an actual demon or the foundation for why people even believe in demons to this day. It could be the root of it, but I found that they couldn't harm me, at least from the point that happened. When I saw that light blast out of my shoulder, Also, to touch base on another thing in that top right corner of the diagram, you may see a little dot, and almost like a footstep map down at the bottom. That was that experience. It occurred on Christmas Day of 2019. That was when I saw what everything else I had seen up to that point had human qualities: living, breathing, communicative. But on that day, I was looking in the middle of my room, and all of a sudden I had called Snuka over to me, and he stopped, and he turned and looked beside him, and I'm like, oh boy, what does he see now? And I looked, and I saw a little darkened object, maybe a few feet above him, and then it was like it slowly revealed itself going down. It turned into a little black felt cowboy type hat that most of us probably had as a little kid when we played cowboys. And it slowly transformed into about a 10, 11-year-old child wearing cowboy play clothes, holding, I dare say, what looked like a Red Ryder BB gun. And he was just standing there, looking right at me, holding that weapon, and my dog was right beside him, and seeing this, I immediately said, Snuka, come here now. He looked down at my dog and poked him with the business end of his little rifle, and I heard the exact words, "Get on, little doggy." And if you watched Westerns like most of us did as a kid, a doggy was a cattle. That was, there's many old country Western songs referring to that. And it was vernacular that was used probably more predominantly for a child like that. And the clothes I saw was somewhere late 50s, maybe early 60s. The early 1950s, 1960s. And when he poked my dog on the rear end and said that, my dog jumped and totally reacted to it. So I'm seeing this thing form from the head down, and my dog react to the contact point. I watched it form and touch my dog, and my dog react. So that, if it hadn't been for everything up to that point, I probably would have freaked out if I had just moved in there and saw that. I'm glad I was weaned on to everything that was occurring, but I looked at him and I'm thinking, and then the parental side of me that loves my dog very much kicked in, and I just looked at him and said, look, if you're going to be here, you can't scare my dog like that. Do you understand? He stood at attention, switched his rifle he was holding to his left hand, and saluted me with his right hand and said, Roger Dodger. Which again, I know to be very old vernacular from around that time frame I had said. That's why I nicknamed him Captain Roger Dodger. And then he began marching like he was doing a routine. He began marching, and he marched over by my closet door, and basically you'll see that's what the little footsteps are, was the way he marched. Well, there was a chair against my closet door, and as he got closer to it, he started fading away and becoming nothingness, but I could see his footsteps in the carpet. And when he got over to where that chair was, it looked like it was blocking him. And I kind of felt that, that was his path. So I was like, well, maybe I might earn some points if I go move the chair. Nope, didn't have to. I watched that chair move on its own, just enough for him to shimmy by it. And then I had a very unique experience from him. I suddenly saw a memory he shared. He was actually older than he was, just by maybe about 3-4 years older. He looked like maybe 12 or 13, something like that. He had longer, a little bit shaggier hair. He was a little bit larger. And I saw him marching that same path, like he was living in that room. And then when he got to the closet door, he opened the closet door, put the BB gun rifle in there, and I saw through his eyes. He had set up a cardboard berm and target inside of that closet and was shooting in it and pretending it was the enemy and he was on duty, just playing like a kid would. And just that quick, I was out of it. I was out of the memory. I had my own eyes back, and the situation was over. But yeah, that was Christmas Day, 2019. That's just something to me, I was honored. But also, it opened me up to a new way of thinking, because I've already concluded that I know I went through something paranormal, but it very much became normal. And this situation opened up a whole new possibility of thought, because I knew with that situation, and of course when I made mention of the conquistador in the old plantation house, that was after that, but that kind of corroborated my original thought that I had with him. And that was that, yes, this was a spirit of a formerly living, and he communicated to me by sharing a memory. And I also felt the emotion he felt inside that memory, which was he was happy. He was having fun. Of course, I thought I might be seeing someone that lived in that house before. I was unable to discover anything in records or any type of records of who used to live in that home. It very well could have been. I did get into the closet and look for BBs down in the carpet, things like that, to see if that would corroborate it. I never found anything of such. But, again, to point out, that was the first and freakiest time I have ever seen a spirit manifest from the top down. And not just that, but make physical contact with my dog. And again, Snuka watching the whole thing. That was, that's basically covering to that. Now, it's somewhere in the future, when I get to a more comfortable setting, I think through doing this interview and several others that I've done in the past and people I've spoken to, I'm getting a little more comfortable, and I'm feeling that I'll probably be able to do a more refined version and timeline of events, kind of like I did with the first 2 interviews. Mm-hmm. And I don't see myself writing a book with it, because I'll just be honest, the people I have met, just through little key and code words and finishing each other's sentences. There's other people that can do this too. And they felt just as lost as me. They felt like they were going crazy. And I won't say exactly what it was, but someone kind of made a comment on a Facebook page dealing with matters like this of something that told me we had seen a similar event occur. And I casually reached out to him and said compassionately, here's the situation. Here's what I saw. And, I'd love it if you gave me the time to speak a little bit more about it. Well, me and this gentleman are now best friends. But for the first month, I literally had to tell him so many times, hey, you're more than welcome, but, you don't have to keep thanking me. He was just so ecstatic. He's like, oh my God, I thought I was crazy. I couldn't talk to anybody about this. I knew what they would think. And then the wave of excitement, whoa, it really is real. And I'm going to be honest, I grew up in a Southern Baptist family. Everything I'm telling you, especially the part where I said, I began experimenting with it. Oh gosh, we all know that's a big taboo. You don't do things like that. I don't regret doing it. It's not something, now, like that old adage, when you're able to, if you know karate, you don't have to use it.
Yeah.
It literally is very similar to that point. I don't feel the need to use it anywhere near like I used to.
Mm-hmm.
But with that home, and also to wrap up one thing, to close them. And when they asked for my key, I looked at that doorway at one point, and it was just brighter, more powerful. And all of a sudden, I heard a voice say, "It's good to see you again. Before you go any further, we will need your key." And that's when I closed my eyes and blinked out away from it. That's basically how I would cut off what was going on.
Let me ask
go ahead.
What do you think? What do you think they wanted your key for?
I think they needed my key for something to physically come through that door.
Mm-hmm.
At this time, everything was stuck on the other side. There was verbal communication. There was mental communication. The mental communication, here's how I describe it. Imagine, if you're talking to your friend and you go, "Hey, will you go up to the store and get me a pack of bubblegum now and laters?" And the person says, if you could ask that, and you go, "Yeah." At that moment, you comprehend the complex request they just gave you. And there's like a little hint of an emotion that basically describes everything they said. You feel a certain emotion. With the mental communication, or telepathy, if someone would call it, it's no verbal sentence, just the emotion. And it was not easy to read at first. But I got better at it through time. I got a lot better. But I also understood, wait a second, if they're asking for my key to do this, then apparently I might have a little power over this. And that's when I stood in front of that door, and this time I went eyes closed. And I basically saw what I kind of thought I might see. I saw the entire room as if my eyes were still open. And I saw that door. And just at a simple thought, the entire door reformatted itself. And I looked down, and just like I'm wearing a VR helmet, there was a settings display. I looked at it, it enlarged, it came straight up to me, and I felt the emotion of what each setting did. And there was a setting to close that portal. At that time, I didn't close it. I didn't know if I would be able to reopen it, but also I knew from that point on, if something happened, like almost happened to me when that thing was charging out at me, I would be guilty if I didn't prevent it, if I could close it. And it took some time, but in roughly toward the end of August 2020, which was about a month before I moved out, I figured if I'm going to close it and make sure it's closed, I need to do it now. And that's when I went in back to that exact same spot within those settings through the same method. And I closed it. And try as I may, try as I might, I didn't try overly hard, but I did it the same way as I had activated the door before. It was gone. It was cut off. And strangely, there was, I gotta say, my room got quite boring really fast.
I imagine so. How did you feel once you closed it? I mean, was there relief? Was there, a little bit of, dang, I kind of wish I hadn't have done that now? Or just, I guess like more curiosity of what still awaited?
Well, it was a little bit of all of that in different stages, but also I came to understand that I was addicted to it. And just like using anything in excess, anything, those rules applied to that as well. Because there were points where, let me go and do this. I'm like, no, I'm moving in a month. I can't leave this like that. I can't. Who knows what a family could move into this room. You never know. Somebody with a kid. I can't do that. And it wasn't a major, like, I didn't go through detox over it or anything, but I did feel a sense of not just relief, but like I had done the right thing. Because through that doorway, I'm going to be clear, I got it to the point to where if there was anything I wanted to see, I could see it. It turned away from random. But also, there were some dark things that would occasionally be attracted to that door. And I could always tell its motives because they would usually use something of a lure of human pleasure, so to speak. That seems to be the first wave of whatever you would call demonic to try and tempt someone. Which fortunately, I wasn't that stupid. I realized what I was looking at that time. I was fully aware, and I'll be very honest, it was It was something I never thought, as I've said before, that not just that I would have experienced, but as I look back now, in so many things that I just could not even cover right now, things that I survived. I feel blessed because it was also in that room, and this may be controversial to some people, but I had a moment where I was allowed to see what people would call God. And it was a very real moment. It was not like anything you'd ever see in a movie, read in a book, or read in the Bible. It literally, I was beyond filled with joy, because that was the thing I had overlooked through all of what I was coming to believe, through my own trial and error, my experiments and everything. And, I don't go preaching to people. I encourage people to look inside themselves, because they have had the chain of custody of everything inside themselves of the truth. That truth's in everyone. And I can tell you what my truth is. But when you find it inside yourself, there's no turning back. You accept it. Anyone else, if I hear something from someone, like an old phrase I learned, a Russian phrase, noviai da proviai, trust, but verify. With yourself, it's already pre-verified when you get it from inside. But I know I had my situation, and I was filled with joy, love, belief, something. It gave me hope, and it changed my life. And, that's something that at some date in the future is a story I might get more detailed with. But right now, some of the things I could say about it, certain religions could hijack it for their own use. And I can't allow that. I have to take some precautions on that. Because if I ever... there were just, I saw a little bit of all religions' history in one shot, and I saw everybody had a little piece of the truth. And I also had the great revelation that when everybody can quit arguing who's right, who's wrong, every religion that practices peace and love of their fellow man, and they sit down and just put nothing but their truth on the table, all the puzzle pieces will come together.
Makes more sense than most things I've heard these days.
Yeah.
Micah, I thank you for your story. It's been an interesting one. We appreciate you coming on the show. I'm glad to see that this is all kind of ended on a high note, and that's always a good thing. And hopefully, hopefully you don't open any more doors, whether, on purpose or by accident. I know, that's one thing about the past, hindsight's 2020, and we, that's what the past is for, is, we learn from it. And so, but yeah, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for having the courage to tell your story. And I hope we did you justice by allowing you to tell it the way you wanted to tell it. And Joey, you got anything you want to say, buddy?
No, I think, we covered a lot of ground in these episodes, and it's it's an amazing story to listen to. And Micah, we thank you for your time and your patience with us as well. And, I just hope we can do justice to, what is, an experience that most people, the majority of people, will never get to experience in that is your life. So we thank you for that, Micah.
Hey, I want to thank all of you, not just you two, but anybody that listens to this in the future. I know I can be long-winded on things, so just bearing that in mind of myself, Wow. I got to thank you guys for your patience, man. Hey, if anybody's listening right now, whether they can hear you or not, man, give these guys a round of applause. Man, they, wow. They've got some perseverance and patience themselves.
Well, we apologize for not being able to, kind of collaborate on this third episode because, we're all working adults and it gets hectic around here sometimes. So we apologize for the schedule conflicts or whatnot, but, we finally got it together. And so I hope we're able to pull all the pieces together and make one story out of it all. And we hope that we did you justice, because that was the biggest thing going into this. From what you had told me, I wanted to make sure that you were given a platform to tell the story the way you wanted to without any influence from us. And that's part of the reason why we kind of kept kind of quiet throughout the whole thing and allowed you to tell your story. We were just sitting back and absorbing it all in.
Well, hopefully, in that case, I want to go ahead and tell you both, you probably want to get a shower. Yeah, but man, I can't thank you enough. And, no matter what anybody else would say, I guess it matters for me. You guys have done me more than justice. And, it's done me a lot of good. I felt it after the last few times, even despite situations that happened afterwards that were unrelated. It still gave me that reassurance. And I wish you guys a long life in this line of work that you've taken up.
Well, thank you very much, Micah. We do appreciate that.
Thank you, Micah.